Yeah. No, being a test pilot was always something that was on my radar. I met a few of them when I was in my first fighter squadron,
Hmm.
and then I started learning about like, well, how do these systems that I'm using right now as a wingman, how do they get fielded? What's that whole acquisition cycle look like? And then you quickly find out that, you know, a developmental test pilot are the ones that are the first to make sure that a system is safe to use and the system meets contractual specifications. So if in the contract, an F-35 is supposed to fly at 50,000 feet, well, someone needs to go take the aircraft up and ensure that it flies at 50,000 feet. So you make sure it's safe, and then you make sure it meets the contract. If it doesn't meet the contract, then you work with the engineers, the program office, the contractor, so in F-35 case, Lockheed Martin, and you try to get the platform or the system up to contractual specifications. And then once it meets the contract and it's safe to fly, you kick it over the wall to operational test pilots. Operational test pilots now ring out that system in emulated combat environments, scenarios, and make sure that it is exactly useful on the battlefield the way that they had hoped it was going to be useful. Because sometimes contractual specifications don't directly, equate to combat
Hmm.
effectiveness,
Yeah,
right? So you have these operators that are operational test pilots making sure that's good, and then after them, it gets to the actual pilot that is in the fighter squadron, and they're able to use it. So developmental test pilots are the ones that go through what we call test pilot school, and they learn to be the first ones to fly something. And so I love the idea of kind of marrying my love of engineering and my love of aviation. And mind you, it's a love of aviation that is really like tactical aviation.
hmm,
And bringing those together was an awesome path. And once I learned more about it, it was my professional goal was to become those people that could get the right capability into the hands of the warfighter and make sure that it was what they needed.
what were they looking for in test pilot school, and how many people make it through that apply?
Um, yeah, the test. Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
What were the instructors looking for at test pilot school?
Yeah.
Like what attributes did you have that they want, and then also what were reasons that guys may not have made it through?
Yeah. So to be able to apply for test pilot school, you need to have engineering background, which just means a degree in engineering or physics or math. And so basically a STEM degree. And then you're looking for people that understand the systems, understand how they're used, and that can work well with the team to relay those requirements that the operator has to the engineers and the acquisition professionals who are trying to get them what they want. So you need someone that's very even keel as well, because you are in scenarios where things aren't going to go the way that you expected because no one's been there before, right? If I'm taking the F-35 for the first time to 50,000 feet, no one's been there. They don't know how that platform is going to perform at 50,000 feet.
Hmm.
And so you need someone that can kind of roll with the punches and make, informed, decisive decisions in the heat of the moment,
For sure.
right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
basically, what we were talking about before. So same there. Did do most people that just to get to that point, you have to be like an above average individual, I'm sure. So do many people not make it through test pilot school, or is it pretty high graduation rate at that point?
Yeah, I've never heard of a pilot that didn't make it through test pilot school
Okay.
in the past few decades. So I think there's some flight test engineers that it's a shock for them because they're not used to that environment.
Hmm.
It's like a pilot training environment. You get a master's degree it's just very intense. But all the pilots are used to it. It's
Yeah.
like pilot training, right? So it is very competitive to get into test pilot school.
Hmm.
That's where the differentiator is. So once you get in, you're in, and it's an amazing community. But to be able to get in, you need to have that STEM background. You need to have done very well with your degrees. You probably need a master's degree as well. I had a master's degree in aerospace engineering as well, on top of my undergrad. You're looking at undergrad GPAs over 3.5, is average. Master's degree GPA is over 3.8 probably. You're looking at about 80 to 100 fighter pilots that will apply every year, and they'll take 10 of them, and you have about a 3-year window where you can apply. So it's extremely competitive. And, you know, I put it in terms that people may understand. Like, I think for about 6 years running, or like it was some crazy number, man. So don't quote me on it, but I think like the top graduate out of the Air Force Academy became a test pilot. So the caliber is really high. And mind you, I felt like out of place. Like I wasn't that caliber, but it really is the cream of the crop that end up applying. So then once you get accepted, and you have to go interview, and it's a flying interview. So they put you in aircraft that you're unfamiliar with and evaluate you with like no time. They don't give you any instruction. They give you a book to read, the night before, and then you go to the interview. You get thrown in the cockpit, and you have to go do these maneuvers in a plane that you're unfamiliar with. If you make it through all that and get picked up, you're going to make it through and be just fine as a test pilot.
That's pretty awesome. So you, looking at your the information you sent me, you worked at the 40th Flight Test Squadron and the 461st Flight Test Squadron. Is there a difference in the two, and what were you doing at those different squadrons?
Yeah, so as a test pilot, you could end up flying things that are very different than what you grew up flying. I grew up flying the F-15C, but typically what happens is you go test the airframe you came from. So I went to the 40th Flight Test Squadron, which is at Eglin Air Force Base, and the two main bases that we do test flying is Eglin Air Force Base in the Panhandle of Florida and Edwards Air Force Base out of the Mojave Desert in California. So I went to the 40th and tested F-15Cs and F-15Es, primarily radar work. So we were testing new radars and we were testing new weapons. So a lot of weapons work. And as test pilots there, you need to be like mission qualified. We would have to go to red flag. We'd have to do all those things that we had to do as fighter pilots. So, BFM, dogfighting, all of those qualifications we had to hold on to. And then we just would take those systems out to the corners of the envelope and make sure that they worked and that they were effective also in our training missions. And then I went and managed the F-35 program, and I'll kind of skip through that. It was acquisition work for a few years. It was eye-opening. And because of that F-35 work, I went out to Edwards and was a director of operations of the 461st Flight Test Squadron. The 461st was responsible for F-35 developmental test. So I was the director of operations for 1 year, and then I fleeted up, we call it, to command. And I was the commander there for 2 years, delivering F-35 capability to the warfighter.
That's an interesting place. I was out at NTC doing some work with F-35s.